could you explain the lumbopelvic mechanics, in particular, the SI joint mechanics during the gait cycle? Andy, yes, I can. If you really want to dive into the weeds of gait mechanics, the best book out there is Human Locomotion by Mashad. I'll link it in the show notes, which will be found on zachcouples.com/pelvic-gait-mechanics. I strongly encourage you to get that book because I'm drawing a lot of my gait mechanics from that. It's very well done. And I also, another great resource if you really want to dive into this would be also Daddy O Pops Bill Hartman, because I think he has taken the whole gait mechanics and simplified it even further. So check those two out. This would be my interpretation of those two sources, and it will tie into how I'm approaching movement for the next question. We're going to use your left leg as a reference point. And the reason why that is, stay tuned, because it's going to make a lot more sense once we get into treatment. So if I am going to discuss gait, I'm going to break it up into 3 phases. The first would be initial contact, when your foot hits the ground. They say everything changes when that happens, you know. Initial contact, mid-stance, which would be when your center of mass is over the leg and you're kind of, in the middle. The last part would be late stance, or the propulsive phase of gait. So you have contact, mid-stance, and propulsion. Those are the 3 phases of gait when we're talking about the stance phase. And that's what I'm going to use in reference to describing what's going on at this lovely pelvis that I have, which would be my grandson. Whatever is occurring on the stance leg, the opposite will be occurring on the swing leg. So if I'm ERing at any point in time on my stance leg, I'm likely going to be IRing at my swing leg. General rules of thumb. With that in mind, let's walk through this. Thank you. I'll be here all night, which is not far off because I got a lot of work to do. Anyways, at stance, when your foot touches the ground, your sacrum is going to be rotated or oriented more so to the right. And then I'm going to be moving towards the opposite end of the spectrum as I go through the phases of gait. So with contact, rule of thumb, sacrum is oriented right, but is going to begin rotating to the left. So that's phase 1. You got a little bit more ER happening on the left. You have a little bit more IR happening on the right, with the sacrum oriented right beginning to rotate to the left. That's step 1. When I go into mid-stance, the hip is flexed in this position. I'm going to be moving towards more hip extension. As I hit mid-stance, the sacrum and the pelvis begin to adduct towards the midline of the left leg. So I have this side shift, or this oblique shift at my pelvis, with the left innominate being higher than the right. This is an adduction component, and this is a further progression of the sacrum rotating to the left. It rotates to the left, and then it glides downward. When I'm in this situation where the sacrum is kind of side shifted to the right almost, with the left sacrum up higher than the right, you're going to have more adduction and internal rotation happening at the pelvis and the FA joint for that matter. That's mid-stance. So it's normal to have a frontal plane side shift during this portion of mid-stance, with continual rotating happening of the sacrum to the left. Early stance, more flexion, ER happening. Sacrum is oriented right, but it's beginning to rotate to the left. When I hit mid-stance, I have more hip extension, adduction, and internal rotation on my left leg. I have this frontal plane shift happening where the left innominate is higher than the right, dynamite. And then the opposite, of course, is happening on the right leg. So I have more abduction and ER. Late stance, propulsion, toe off, whatever you want to call it. Now the sacrum is fully rotated to the left. So I have more counter nutation on the left side. I have a little bit of nutation going on the right side. But the sacrum is rotating left. At this point in time, you're going to have more femoral external rotation on the right. You're going to have maximal extension and internal rotation on the left. And that would be the 3 phases of gait when it comes to stance. So you have a starting point, early stance. Sacrum is oriented right, beginning to rotate left. It's more of an ER bias on the left side. When I hit mid-stance, I'm still rotating the sacrum to the left, but I have more adduction and internal rotation happening at the pelvis and the femur. And then, with propulsive phase of gait, late stance, the sacrum is fully rotated to the left. I have a lot more adduction and internal rotation, but at the pelvis, there's more of an ER bias. And this is where I think Bill's model is very useful and effective, because then it applies, especially when we're talking to interventions, is you have more of an ER bias at early stance, a more IR bias of the pelvis at mid stance, and a re-external rotation bias at late stance or propulsion. And we have this alternation between these phases as you go, with the sacrum essentially spinning around the stance leg as I move through my phases of gait. And that's really what happens every time you take a step. And then when I go to the right, it simply alternates. I rotate around the left leg, and then I rotate the sacrum around the right leg. And we just do this. To summarize that right quick for you fine folks. Sacrum orients right when I'm talking about left stance, or it orients away, and it's beginning to rotate towards the stance leg. At initial contact, there is more external rotation happening. The sacrum is going to begin rotating to the left. As it rotates to the left, it's going to have some counter nutation on the left, a little bit of nutation on the right. That's what creates that sacral rotation left. As I hit mid-stance, I have almost a frontal plane side shift downward, where the left innominate would be higher than the right. This is more internal rotation biased. At the femur on the left, you have adduction and IR and extension happening. And then as I hit propulsive phase or late stance, the sacrum fully rotates to the left. You have more general external rotation happening about the pelvis. And on the stance leg, you have progressive extension, adduction, internal rotation happening. Whatever is happening on the stance leg, the opposite happens on the swing. So if it's at initial contact, flexion, abduction, ER, the swing leg is going to be more extended, adducted, and IR'd. As I hit mid-stance, it's more extension, adduction, IR on the stance leg. Swing leg is more flexion, adduction, ER, and then that progresses to the full amount when I hit late stance or the propulsive phase of gait. Amazing question, Andy. Hopefully that helped you.